January 30th. He shows up again. Same figure, same door, same neighborhood. But this time something is different. This time he is carrying a backpack. And this time he has a weapon. He wasn't improvising. He wasn't passing through. He came mission ready. And that single detail, the backpack, the weapon, the third confirmed visit to Nancy Guthrie's home, tells you everything about what this was. This was not a crime of opportunity. This was the conclusion of a process, a calculated, methodical, weeks-long process of preparation that the evidence now documents with a specificity that is almost impossible to dismiss. We know he was there January 11th. We have reason to believe he was there again in the days following, around the 20th. And then January 30th, backpack, weapon, ready. The lights go out inside the house. He waits. He approaches the front door. And by 2:29 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker goes silent. That's the timeline. That's what the data says. Not a theory, not a guess. A sequence documented by the device keeping her alive. Subscribe to Redacted Files Lab right now if you haven't already. What I'm about to walk through involves evidence that hasn't been fully examined publicly, and it could be the thread that breaks this case open. Let's talk about the night Nancy disappeared, because there is a piece of this story that has been sitting in plain sight, largely unexamined, for weeks. An Uber driver picked Nancy Guthrie up that evening and took her to dinner with her daughter Annie. That ride, that car, that driver, all of it exists as a data source that investigators are now reportedly taking a fresh look at. Not just what was captured on any camera inside the vehicle, not just the route the car took, but what was in the background. What was already in position when that Uber pulled up to Annie Guthrie's home? What was parked along the street, waiting, when Nancy was dropped back off at her house and the lights eventually went dark? Because here is what the evidence strongly suggests. The person who took Nancy Guthrie from her bed was already in that neighborhood when she got home that night. Already there, positioned, watching the Honda CR-V pull into the driveway, watching the lights inside the house go on, then off, timing it. The Uber ride, the drop-off, the lights. All of it was observed by someone who had been studying this woman's movements for weeks and knew exactly what sequence of events meant she was alone and asleep. That is not speculation. That is the logical conclusion of what the camera footage already shows. He was there before. He knew her patterns. January 30th, he came ready to act on them. Now here's the piece that deserves far more attention than it has received. Annie Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, Savannah's sister, a woman who lives close to that neighborhood and knows every road, every shortcut, every back way through those streets, went into a neighborhood group chat in the first days of the investigation and shared a map, a specific detailed map of the route she believed the kidnapper used to leave the scene. Not a vague direction, a traced route with specific addresses marked along the way, shared publicly in the hope that anyone with security cameras along that path would save their footage and come forward. She did this on her own. She did this because she wasn't getting answers. She did this because her mother was missing, and investigators, in those critical early hours, were still entertaining the possibility that an 84-year-old woman who could not walk more than 50 yards on her own power had simply wandered off. Let me sit with that for a moment. Annie Guthrie was inside that house telling law enforcement, she cannot walk. Her walker is here. Her shoes are here. Her glasses are here. Her phone is here. She did not leave on her own. And the response in those first crucial hours was to treat it as an elderly person wandering off. Those are not just procedural errors. Those are the kinds of decisions that determine whether critical video gets preserved or whether it expires on a server somewhere, overwritten, gone forever. Now let's look at what Annie's map actually shows, because a crime reporter working this case overlaid that escape route onto other known evidence, and something significant emerged. Roughly 2.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, investigators had previously noted a car captured on a ring camera on a back road off the main grid. That sighting was dismissed at the time, but when Annie's route map is laid over a satellite view of that area, the back road falls directly inside the escape corridor she identified, not adjacent to it, inside it, consistent with it, a dismissed piece of evidence, a family member's route theory, 2 data points that nobody had connected, and now they line up. Along that same route, cameras everywhere, a nail salon with a front-facing lens pointed directly at the parking lot and the roadway. An elementary school with overlapping camera fields at every corner of the building, overlapping fields that, if the cameras were functioning, would have captured any vehicle making that turn from multiple simultaneous angles. A pharmacy, a gas station, an ATM, a renovated commercial space that, depending on when the cameras were reinstalled after construction, may or may not have been recording that night. And here is the question that no one has answered publicly after nearly 90 days. If this was the route and these cameras were recording, why has no vehicle been identified? There are two possible answers. Either the route is wrong, or the person driving that vehicle knew exactly which roads would keep him out of frame. He avoided the main intersections. He cut through desert access roads where no camera follows. He planned the exit the same way he planned everything else, methodically, repeatedly, in advance. Because this is what the behavioral pattern tells us. Every time this individual has appeared in documented evidence, he has been deliberate. The flower arrangement placed over Nancy's porch camera. The multiple reconnaissance visits before the night of the abduction. The specific timing, waiting until the lights went out, waiting until the neighborhood was completely quiet. The weapon in the backpack on January 30th, and only on January 30th, because he had made his decision and he came prepared to execute it. This was not someone who got lucky. This was someone who worked at this. And that brings me to the blood. On Nancy Guthrie's front porch, investigators documented blood evidence, specific blood evidence, droplets with a distinct pattern, small deposits alongside larger ones, the kind of pattern that forensic analysts describe as consistent with expirated blood, the kind that comes from the nose or the mouth under specific physical circumstances. Not a transfer, not a smear. Droplets with distinct shapes and a directionality that tells a story about what happened on that porch. There is a theory circulating that the blood was staged, that Nancy was taken somewhere else and someone returned to deposit her blood at the scene to mislead investigators. The physical evidence makes that extraordinarily difficult to support. The pattern of those droplets is not something you replicate with a transfer. The physics of how blood moves when it leaves a body under those specific circumstances, the size of the deposits, the tiny satellite droplets, the spatial relationship between them, all of that points to a single conclusion. That blood was deposited where it was found, at that porch, that night. What does that tell us? It tells us that something happened at that door, or very near it, on the night Nancy disappeared. It tells us that the porch is not incidental to what happened. It is central to it. And here's the detail about the foliage found on top of the blood that has confused people. On camera, the same figure who appears at Nancy's front door on previous nights is seen handling a flower arrangement near the area of the camera. Foliage, the same type that was later found in contact with the blood on the porch. The explanation is not complicated. It fell. Gravity, time, and a porch that wasn't secured as a crime scene the way it needed to be. Now, fresh eyes. We're told that new investigators have been brought in to review this evidence from the beginning. The video footage, the physical evidence, the timeline, all of it. And in any investigation that has run this long without a resolution, that is exactly the right call, not because the original investigators failed at their jobs, but because human beings get locked into the frameworks they build early. A fresh set of eyes comes in without the weight of 88 days of accumulated assumptions. They see things that familiarity has made invisible. The FBI is reportedly driving that fresh review, and if there is any reason for cautious optimism in this case, it is that. Because the FBI controls the clock here, not the perpetrator. They have time, resources, and institutional expertise that no county sheriff's department can match. And the evidence waiting to be fully processed, the DNA from the hair sample, the thousands of hours of video still being reviewed, the digital data from every vehicle connected to that night, that evidence does not expire. What does expire is public attention. What does expire is the pressure that keeps a case at the front of an investigative queue, which brings me, again, to the sheriff. The Pima County Sheriff was given 10 days to respond to the Board of Supervisors' questions under oath in a sworn statement. His response was not sworn. It was not under oath. He sat down with an attorney and produced what amounts to an annotated list of explanations, submitted, technically, within the deadline, but without the legal weight the board specifically required. He has now, effectively, told a county oversight body to take what he chose to give them and figure out what to do with it. The board must now decide whether that constitutes a violation of the statute they're operating under, a violation that would, potentially, give them the authority to remove him from office. A recall effort is running in parallel, though the signature threshold required makes it a long shot under any realistic timeline. And here's the question I keep returning to, the one that connects all of this. Does any of it matter to the investigation? Retired investigators who know this department from the inside say the answer's complicated. The dedicated personnel working the Nancy Guthrie case are, by all accounts, doing their jobs to the best of their ability under difficult circumstances. The leadership crisis at the top of the department did not cause this crime and is not actively obstructing the investigation in any deliberate sense. But here's what it did do. It hollowed out the department. Hundreds of years of combined investigative experience walked out the door, transferred, not retired, because experienced people took to motions to get away from a culture they couldn't work inside anymore. It created a structure where the FBI had to be pushed in rather than welcomed from day one, where outside search resources were declined without explanation, where the institutional reflexes that a well-functioning department develops over decades of collaborative work with peer agencies simply don't exist the way they should. That's the cost, not obstruction, atrophy, and in a case that depends on institutional muscle memory, on the kind of experienced, intuitive, investigative work that only comes from years inside the specific landscape, atrophy is its own form of failure. Somewhere along Annie Guthrie's route map, there may be a camera that caught a vehicle at 2 a.m. Somewhere in the FBI lab, there is a hair sample waiting for a DNA result. Somewhere in the thousands of unprocessed tips sitting in an investigative queue, there may be a name, and somewhere, someone knows who that man is. The one who stood at Nancy Guthrie's door in the dark, carrying a backpack, carrying a weapon, ready. They know who he is. They just haven't said it yet. Here's the question I want you to answer in the comments, and I want the specific answer, not the diplomatic one. Annie Guthrie shared a detailed escape route map with her neighbors in the first days of the investigation, a route that, when overlaid with other known evidence, produced a connection that investigators had previously dismissed. She did this because she felt like she wasn't being heard, because in the critical first hours, law enforcement treated her missing, medically fragile mother as a possible walkaway. My question, if that route had been taken seriously from hour one, if every camera on that corridor had been canvassed immediately before any footage could expire. Do you think this case looks different today? Tell me where you land. Subscribe to Redacted Files Lab. The DNA results are coming. The Fresh Eyes review is ongoing. And the file on Nancy Guthrie is still very much open. It has just been redacted.